a new system requiring site-based budgeting. However, we've always had the flexibility to do that, and we continue to have that flexibility under LCFF if that's the local choice that's made by your district and or charter. So LCFF is viewing districts as the entity of management as we have with our former structure of funding, and that continues. So, as you can see, many things are different in this system, not the least of which is how we should be thinking about what resources mean to education. And we will see things that help hopefully support the planning and the use of funds. One of the first pieces, though, is, and we know districts and charters have this question right now, is where's the money coming from? So we have members from the Legislative Analyst's Office here today, and we thank them for the recent primers that they put out on LCFF, and I borrowed one of their images. And this is to show that what you have in LCFF, you can actually explain in stick figures, okay? That while we look at this and say this is new, this is different, and oh my gosh, this is a lot of money, it really is explainable at a pretty, what the overall intent is and the way the formula works through an image like this. So what you see in this image is a group of students. There's 22 stick figures, and this explains the basics of the formula. The formula at its most simple level is that it's about base funding per student that varies based on grade spans. It then has a small number of adjustments. I emphasize small number of adjustments. This includes K-3 class size, where we'll provide more per student as a percent determined based on the base amount for the grade span. It includes a small adjustment for college and career readiness support based on the base amount for our students that are in grades 9 to 12. And then the next adjustment is one that we have for what we call our unduplicated pupils, or shown here in this graph or this image as the EL, English Learner, and LI, Low Income Supplement. This also includes our foster youth. So it's the unduplicated count of pupils that are low income English learners and foster youth. And they generate 1 to 2 supplements. So the way this is generated is for the first 55% of English learners, low income students, foster youth, they will generate an add-on of 20% of the base amount. And you can see that in this image, showing that for the first 55%, so that would be, well, let me say, actually, let me back up a second. Actually, all our students that fall into that category will generate that add-on, okay, that first weight. You can see in the figure before you, that fourth column over where it says ELLI supplement. For all the light blue, dark blue stick figures, that's what's being generated. For those that are above the 55% threshold, so in this graph, I have 22 students, 2 of them, meaning I have a total of 14 students, so the last 2 are above the 55% threshold, they're going to generate what's considered a concentration amount, which is 50% of the base. Now I must emphasize that while we have stick figures, we have columns, we have numbers in each of those columns, this is a formula. This is the way the dollars get generated through the formula to the local education agency to manage on behalf of students. And so through this formula, you can see that there are differential amounts that would be the target under LCFF in the current year, and that's what the total column is. The asterisk is added from the LAO's document, just to be clear that this does include the cost of living adjustment for 2013-14, but because we're not in a position yet to fully fund LCFF, this does remain a target at this point in time. So when you look at this, you can see different amounts per student, but that aggregates up at the district level as to how much is generated through LCFF, with an understanding that districts or charters have an obligation to provide for improved and enhanced services for the students for which we have in our unduplicated populations. Right? So this is a formula. This is the components of the formula for every district and charter in the state that has students in K-3. This is what their numbers would look like. So part of a major piece to LCFF is now we can see comparability to what every district is experiencing, which will hopefully aid in transparency. We don't have different ways calculating things for different types of schools and or districts. So this is just an overview, and I would encourage you, if you want more information about the background of LCFF and how the components work, the Legislative Analyst Office has done a tremendous job of putting that all together with many pictures beyond just this one, and would encourage you to take a look at that. We are now in the 2013-14 school year, or as well as fiscal year, and this is the first year of LCFF. This is our transition year, and it's recognized in the legislation in terms of what we are anticipating to happen. There are many things that need to be addressed and attended to. I think in terms of the timing of LCFF, just something to keep in mind. While we now have this bill, it passed into law, signed by the governor at the very end of June, goes into effect July 1. This was years in the making to get to the point where we had legislation that implemented some reform like LCFF. We are, if you think about July 1 and we're here in mid-August, we're 7 weeks from when that happened. And it's going to take us a bit of time, hopefully not too much, but a bit of time to process this, to do this right. And the goal here is to take LCFF and make it something that's really an enduring change in our finance system, not just a quick change. And so with that in mind, we've begun the transition process in 2013-14. We are here now. One of the things that we're very interested in hearing is what is it that you need in terms of support, what is it that you have in terms of ideas for how to support implementation, knowing that you have schools that are opening, if not already open, and operating. And so funding is one part of what allows you to support your schools and your districts. So we're interested in what we need to think about for transition, but largely beginning LCFF. The real work in terms of LCFF is seen as where we're going to implement in 2014-15. So the preparatory work the State Board is looking at this point, based on what's in the legislation, is how does the State Board adopt regulations and templates that are supportive of the field, taking 2014-15 as its first full year where we have the opportunity to plan budgets, develop the accountability plans, and then have those adopted in place in time for the beginning of the 2014-15 school year. With the expectation that we really won't be at full implementation until 2020-2021, at which point in the intervening years we'll be phasing in the requirements. We're going to be seeing the availability of the regulations that should be followed, templates that should be used, but we're largely looking to feedback because we take seriously local control. These need to be local ideas, things that work to support local initiatives. So the specific tasks of the State Board are to develop regulations by January 31st, 2014. These need to guide the use of funding. You can see the Ed Code section reference on the slide. Templates also, so if we look at the local control accountability plan, that's amongst them, including the way that funding is being used, as in the budget, the spending plan for the company. Those need to be in place by March 31st, 2014. And these are, again, intended to map into the planning cycles that districts and charters have for their 2014-15 budgets. In addition, following all of this will be rubrics. Rubrics to evaluate what has been, where there's needs for improvement or intervention, and those will follow the development of regulations and templates, but certainly will be cognizant of those in a supportive way. So at this point, what we'd like to do is, with that background in mind, I encourage you, the Department of Education has been posting and will continue to post a number of resources to you to give the latest updates, give more information, answering questions. And if you go to the Department of Education's website, which is www.cde.ca.gov, right on the home page, right in the center, there's an area that says Local Control Funding Formula. If you click on that, you'll go right to the page that has posted recent correspondence with the field, recently posted frequently asked questions, there's more to come, and other information that would be helpful to provide you with additional background about LCFF. So what we're really here today to do is hear from you. And we not only have this opportunity in this room today, as well as those joining us in our satellite locations to hear from you, but we also have other means. So I see many of you have little yellow cards that were at the registration desk. Everything that we collect today via your comments shared at the table today as part of the public comment, shared on yellow cards if you choose to write comments, submitted in writing if you have prepared comments and you'd rather just hand those in, or sent to us through our public comment email address, which is lcff.wested@wested.org, will be registered into the record of all public input through the regional sessions that we're having. So we had one last Thursday in Southern California, and we will be in the Central Valley tomorrow. So all three of those input sessions, in addition to all of their input received via cards, via email, being things handed to us, are being compiled, will be summarized to share with the state board, as well as a full summary posted out and shared. And if you signed in, we have your email address. We'll make sure that you receive that. We realize this is not just we can't possibly fit everyone in a stadium and hear from everyone, but we do want to give you the benefit that this is really a dialogue that we're having, a conversation that we're having, and providing those opportunities in ways where you can continue to see that and comment further once you see what others in other places have commented on, or with the benefit of thinking, you're able to offer in terms of ideas. And so we are tracking everything, not only through the summaries, but also in a database. And our database is all issues raised, questions raised go in, and solutions are offered. We actually are trying to map them together to come up with ideas as we present to the state board specifics. So we do a variety of ways. I encourage you, use the method that seems most comfortable to you. All comments are welcome. All comments will be considered as we put together our summaries, and I think, quite honestly, all are necessary for us to really be thoughtful about how we effectively implement local control funding formula. We know we have a variety of people that want to comment today. We have organized the comments into 3 topical areas, and that includes transparency and community involvement, LCFF budget and funding use, and local control accountability plans. The reason that we've asked you to sign up within those topics is that we're hoping that you can start hearing comments that are of similar topic, maybe certainly different ideas. And we realize people may have many topics they want to address, but we've asked just to allow for maximum participation that everyone sign up just once. We will have a limit to our comments. With 2 minutes, I will be timekeeper. We ask that if you are making comments, I will read off names in advance, and that comments will be given from the table. So for those of you joining us in our satellite locations or down the hall here, if you hear your name called, please make your way to the room and enter through the side door, and we'll be able to have your comment heard here. So we're going to first hear from those here in our primary locations, comments about topics, and then we'll turn it over to our satellite location at Shasta County Office of Education to hear those comments after. So with that, I am going to just get comment, please. And we also have a translator available in case anyone requires translation services. And if you do, please just go to the registration desk and we'll accommodate translation services as part of today's session. So our first topic is transparency and community involvement. And I'm going to call up, and again, if you're making comments, please come to the side of the table opposite me, and we'll hear from you again. 2 minutes. I will set the stopwatch. Okay, so our first speaker will be Grace Trujillo. Second will be Roberta Berger, followed by Sue Sickle and Peggy Parker. And again, keep in mind, 2 minutes, I'll give you a 20-second warning. Yes, please use the microphone, and for the record, give us your name and
Okay. My name is Grace Trujillo, and I'm from the Sacramento School District, and I'm a parent. I've been speaking in various of these local control funding, and I think the key thing is the law clarity is going to get the funding. The kids are going to get the adequate funding. The baseline, I know in each school there's always different baselines. I think that's going to be the key thing. Districts need to educate the parents, regulations, making sure there's no loopholes. Being an accountant, I know that, so I think it's very important. Clear guidelines, I think it's very important to have them now because otherwise we're going to spend years and years in the revision process. Also, priorities support the laws of the new around the parent and advocacy committees. Because right now we have all these committees in place, but parents are not being inputted. They're kind of being, the ones that want to be part of, they're not being part of in order to make the decision process. It's only a select group of parents that sometimes are in that particular decision making. Also, to keep parents, teachers, and the school sites administrators in the dark regarding the rights and responsibilities of the community. Also, it's important not just to allow to continue ignoring the law. I think parents need to be part of it as well as everybody else. Transparency and community involvement. I think the state should require districts to make the local controlling and accountability plan details on how expenditures in each fiscal year implementation is done. Also, we must be able to see the funding in the law requirements. Also, to be clear and precise of the law, parent involvement, suggestions that need to be seen in terms of supporting the parents to become participants. Thank you. And also, I'm also a parent for the PTA, and I think the PTA needs to be in full force because that's our leading. We shouldn't just be fundraising, we should be advocates for our kids.
So I'd ask, we have a very sensitive mic at the comment table, so if you could hold it maybe 8 inches down, and if you have a soft voice, elevate from there. But the mic will carry and pick up voices, so please.
Good morning, my name is Roberta Ferger. I'm representing Pico, California. We're a statewide community organizing network representing 450,000 families around the state. First, I want to thank you for this opportunity today. Local control funding formula really does represent an unprecedented opportunity to bring a broad and diverse group of parents, community, students to the table to really own the future of districts, to own the accountability plans, the implementation of those plans, and the allocation of resources to support those plans. To really live into that vision, it's important to have structures and processes in place that allow that to happen. So to that end, some recommendations. One is that there really does need to be a clear process in every district for selecting the parents that are on the committees. It needs to be broadly representing the whole diversity of parents, but especially those parents of students for whom LCFF is intended. I think it's really important because that we take extra measures to reach out to parents who may not typically be sitting at the table, so it's a bigger table for more parents to participate in. The second thing is that parents, students, and community members need to be involved at both the school site and the district level, and that's in developing the plans in an authentic way. So rather than just commenting on a plan that's already been developed, really sitting at the table and developing those plans collectively, and then thinking about how the resources match those plans. The last thing is we appreciate and really believe firmly in the importance of including parent engagement as one of the criteria by which districts will be measured, and want to make sure that there's some clear rubrics, if you will, for evaluating whether districts are actually involving parents at a deeper and deeper level. The last thing in my 12 seconds, just want to say that school site and district level transparency of funding, both funding coming in and how it's spent, is going to be really critical for authentic parent and community engagement. Thank you.
Sue Stickles, Deputy Superintendent, Sacramento County Office of Education. First of all, I'd like to thank the department, State Board, and West Ed for hosting these sessions. This is the first in many steps of putting together a new process and making sure that it runs right. To that end, I want to make sure and encourage, and I think this is a good first step, that we are very inclusive of everybody in terms of putting this together, because it is important, it is hard work, and it's going to require a lot of really smart people to do it, and a lot of those really smart people are in this room, so thank you very much.
So after we have Peggy Park Carter. We'll have Katie Nunez Adler, Priscilla Cox, Diana McDonald.
Good morning, I'm Peggy Parker. I'm here on behalf of the California State PTA. I thank you for the opportunity to be able to be heard on this very important issue. It's important that we have the inclusive factor in all of this, and I would like to put some points forth for consideration. How will parents be selected to serve on the advisory committees? And how can I be involved at my site level or my district level if I'm not selected to be on that committee? What languages will the materials be presented in, and how will they be distributed? And what kind of outreach is going to be required so that we are inclusive and reach all of the parents? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Katie Nunez Adler, and I'm representing Pico, California, that Roberta was referencing, but our Oakland affiliate. I'm a parent of a rising fourth grader who's about to start school, attending a low-income school in central Oakland. And our organization represents about 40,000 families in Oakland, in congregations and in schools. So I also wanted to start by thanking you for really lifting up and ensuring that we have strong community participation in this process. And in that line, I wanted to ask to have additional regional input sessions in the Bay Area and in the Inland Empire. A lot of the families that would have liked to have been here today couldn't because of childcare and access, and just making sure that the voices of those who are directly impacted can be included in the development of the process. In addition, I just wanted to say that we need to ensure that there's clear reporting of funds, not only at the district level, but also at the school site levels, both on how much base, supplemental, and concentration funding is available, and also how it's spent. And that we want to make sure that parents and community and students are involved in decision-making at the district level, but also at the school site level through school site councils. We think it's really critical that school site councils are involved in developing accountability plans and deciding on how the funds are spent. We believe deeply in local decision making and think that we're best equipped, those who are closest to, closest to the issues and the problems that are affecting our communities are best equipped at developing the solutions. Finally, again, we'd like to ask that you include our voices at the state level in the regional sessions. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Priscilla Cox. I'm a board member of Elk Grove Unified School District and a delegate to California School Board Association. Our school district is the largest in Northern California, and similar to California, enrolls a very diverse population with approximately 59% qualifying for supplemental funding. As a longtime board member, I'm very enthused about the new opportunities afforded with the dramatic, long-awaited changes in school funding and the prospect of working with our communities to actively engage our parents, our employees, and students in the discussion of strategies to provide the best public education possible. We also have many questions as the process and regulations move forward. Two are, will we truly have the local control and flexibility needed to meet the needs of each and every one of our nearly 62,000 children? And will we have clarity on direction with the time to make meaningful strategic decisions? Included in this needs to be consistent, adequate, predictable funding source with the ability for governance teams to designate the best use of funds at the district level with collaboration from our school sites and, of course, our parent community. We are already planning ways to meet and engage our parents, but we must be able to use this information to align our budget to meet desired outcomes. Should be the ability to target goals across the district of very unique community populations. For example, our district has adopted a very effective K-12 regional approach within our larger district to serve our families, and having the flexibility to innovate, build on, and sustain our best practices such as this is critical. Every region's different, every school's different, just as each child is unique. This has the potential to make a powerful difference where outcomes for students have historically been not well served by public education. But the key word is potential. We need clear, reasonable, timely guidelines to meet expectations and make this potential a reality. And just as we are excited about involving our parents and school communities, we hope you will continue to involve school board members in your decisions. Thank you.
So after our next speaker, Susanna Lunenberg, Enrique Palacios, Lupe Cazares, and Fabiola Santiago.
Good morning, my name is Diana MacDonald and I'm from the California State PTA. Parent and community engagement must begin now. We believe that while the development of local control accountability plans is not required until 2014, parents need to understand the budget at their district so that they can have meaningful participation in future budget decisions. To have transparency, parents need the accessible information sent home to parents in a language and in a template that they can actually understand. So my question is, will there be training for parents to understand the budget process?
Good morning. My name is Lupe, a part of PICO organization in San Jose, representing 50,000 families. And we would like to say that we appreciate our allies from diverse groups who work directly closely with us. And we believe that the diversity of groups at the state level should include organizations that are directly working on the ground with low-income students and families. And there must be enough time for meaningful parent, student, and community involvement in the development of the plans. And lastly, discussion of plans must happen at the state, site, and district level. Site councils must be part of this process. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Susan Levenberg. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here representing California Forward, and I also serve as a trustee of the Davis Joint Unified School District. The local control funding formula proposed by Governor Brown and enacted by lawmakers this year spells out the state's priorities and the process that local districts will follow in developing their local control accountability plans. The state's priorities are appropriately and clearly identified. High-quality teachers, instructional materials and facilities, parental involvement, core content, and metrics of student success. The provisions are very well crafted, incorporating years of research, recommendations, and real-world experience that were just waiting for political leadership. California Forward and Children Now align in supporting the implementation of local control accountability plans, which link expenditures to goals developed through an inclusive and transparent public process. Through our work with local governments, policy experts, and advocates, California Forward understands there's a growing need for a new role for the state, one that builds capacity for continuous improvement and creates a dynamic in which governments learn from the best and the brightest among them. The local control funding formula contains the foundation for just such a catalyst for change, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. The title is promising. Research and experience tells the organization should be collaborative, not a bureaucracy or even a consultancy. It should be peer-to-peer. The core school districts provide one good model. They're not waiting for new law, but have developed their own learning collaborative. They're collecting and sharing data, analysis, and conclusions from their failures and successes. In the world of reform, the local control funding formula is sea change. For it to work, and public education simply must work to keep the California dream alive, the state's interests and agencies must be collaborative, informed, and function, and committed not just to intervention in failing districts, but to excellence in all districts. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Enrique Palacios. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Schools for Pittsburgh Unified School District in Contra Costa County. And first of all, I would like to thank the Governor and the State of California for really making a real change in school financing, much needed. It definitely has simplified the way that we're going to fund schools. The one area that I wanted to talk about is something that is definitely new for school districts, and that is the oversight by the County Office of Ed. As we know, the County Office of Ed does have fiscal oversight of school districts, and that overall has been pretty successful since its inception. However, now that the county is going to have new oversight, especially over the area of instruction, I think that this area is not as black and white as with financial matters. In financial matters, you either have money or you don't. But when it comes to instruction, I think it's a little bit more subjective, and the whole area of philosophy of education and program education programs can be controversial, and it can create conflict between local boards, superintendents, and county officials. So as the board develops these regulations, let's just make sure that this particular area is pretty prescribed, is pretty clear, so it's not left open and broad. Thank you very much.
So we have one more commenter here in the room, and then we will turn it over to our those joining us in Shasta County office.
Good morning, my name is Fabiola Santiago. I'm here representing Human Impact Partners. We're a nonprofit organization based in Oakland, California. I'm here for, well, a couple of reasons. One is that we are actually working with an organization in Los Angeles called Alliance for a Better Community, and we're working with the implementation process of the LCFF. What HIP, which is Human Impact Partners, does is that we do health impact assessments. So we look at policies, programs, plans, and see how they affect health in general. The LCFF is a perfect example to see how this implementation process will affect the health of the communities that are going to be affected by this. So one is I'd like to just throw this information out there, so if anyone's interested in collaborating or getting more information, and also I'd like to request if anyone has data or research that they're working on that's related between education and health, then please do follow up with me. My name is Fabiola, again, I'm in the other room. And also we'd like to just make sure that there's more transparency, more information from the LCFF so that we can better understand how the implementation process will follow. Thanks.
Thank you. So for our comments in Shasta County.
Good morning, Sacramento. We have one speaker this morning on this topic, and it's Terry Vigil.
Hello, my name is Terry Vigil. I'm the current president for the Fall River Joint Unified School District, and I'm also representing California School Boards Association. I would like to start out by saying that I appreciate the hearings we are having today. This needs to be a collaborative effort in creating a formula that works for all stakeholders. I'm very proud of the work that my board and the leadership of our superintendent have shown in the way of community involvement. At the beginning of the school year, we have a goal-setting meeting with all stakeholders involved. Our community is involved in setting goals for the school year, as is our administration team and both unions. This is a key component of LCFF. As a board, we value our parents as an integral part of our education team. As a small rural school district, we should be a target area for LCFF. We have challenges that other districts don't share. Large transportation costs, we are 1,200 square miles, high socioeconomic challenges, and a large ELL population. Please consider these areas when funding small rural schools, as most show all of your target areas. The language that states the ability to use supplemental and concentrated funds will be used in ways no more restrictive than Title I also is a concern. If in fact we have the ability to use funds to fully serve our student population, the fund should be available for district-wide programs. Also, the language that refers to proportional expenditures needs to be flexible. We want to use every dollar in such a way that no student is left behind.
20 seconds.
Going back to the small schools issue again, we don't have large office teams that have time for large amounts of paperwork. We need LCAP to be user-friendly. It would be very helpful to have clear, timely messages and communications from the state regarding the template and state priorities. Please, as I stated before, we need information to be accessible and in a user-friendly format. Thank you.
That concludes our speaker list here in Shasta. We'll turn it back over to you, Sacramento.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our next topic area, which is LCFF budget and funding use. For that, we have, I believe, 8 speakers. 7 actually, plus 1 speaker in our Shasta location. So I'll call up Michelle Huntoon, followed by Sherry Gamba, Liz Guillen, Ted Herr.
Good morning. Michelle Hentoon, CBO, Stockton Unified School District, speaking on behalf of Dr. Stephen Louder, Superintendent. We applaud the Governor Brown, in leading the efforts of funding for education of students in California. The implementation of the funding change for education, the first in 30 plus years, will require the ability of school agencies to establish priorities at the local level to meet the needs of the student population locally to ensure success of those students. The funding formula is providing additional funds for those students identified as English learners and low income status through additional supplemental and concentration funding. Without the ability to establish priorities and programs locally to meet the needs of those students, school agencies statewide will be in the same situation of using funds based on state-determined criteria and restricting local governing boards to establish those priorities. Now that we are beginning to climb out of the economic downturn, placing restrictions on future funds that were previously unrestricted will be a step in the wrong direction. Class size restrictions will place undue pressure on school agencies that lack facilities. This is of particular concern now that the state funding for facilities has all but dried up and the future of the state bond in 2014 is uncertain. If the projected funding under the LCFF does not come to fruition in future years, some relief for school agencies should be incorporated as a safety net to eliminate the necessity to reduce staff and programs in the future. Thank you for this opportunity.
Good morning, my name is Sherry Gamba and I'm the Associate Superintendent of Business for the West Contra Costa Unified School District. The local control funding formula has the potential to offer school districts and the communities we serve to be able to rebuild budgets, programs, and begin recovering from the economic crisis. The West Contra Costa Unified School District will receive $6.4 million more in funding than we had anticipated, absent the LCFF for 13-14. However, our preliminary calculations indicate that $10 million being the concentration funding would be restricted. So that means we would be receiving, we would be restricting more money than what we're getting in new money. If the supplemental is restricted, the problem, of course, is much worse. We are a district like many that's weathered the economic crisis through a series of employee concessions, reducing salaries and benefits of employees, school closures, and program cuts. And even with the improved funding model, we are operating with $23 million less than we had in 2007-8. It's important that the state provide maximum flexibility as we districts move towards economic recovery. We're asking that funding be unrestricted so that districts are given local control and flexibility to truly create a local plan. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Liz Guillen. I'm the Director of Legislative and Community Affairs with Public Advocates. We're a nonprofit civil rights law firm. We work closely with community-based organizations across the state, organizations that work with parents and students. The law is clear that services for English learners, low-income students, and foster youth will have to be increased in proportion to the increase in funds generated by these students through the formula. A question is, increased from what? The state should require and help districts to identify the current level of expenditures already being devoted to support services for these students so that they can follow the law and they can share this information with the public. Obviously, this will require an accurate count of students by their subgroups. The state board must take care that its regulations on district-wide uses of LCFF funds, all the funds, not just supplemental and concentration, that the regulations not create a loophole that allows districts to use state funds in a way the law intended. To say that a use that results in increased services for all students does not necessarily qualify as having an impact on the students that it was intended to impact. The state should provide clear guidelines on what is and what is not a permissible district-wide use. Otherwise, the formula will be gamed. After all, it was this gaming that the legislature sought to remedy by the establishment of categorical programs. Flexibility is not absolute. Thank you.
So after we hear from our next speaker, the following speakers will be Terry Burns, Tracy Witten, Jim Knox, and Jennifer Rivera.
Ingrid Riverson with Alameda County Office of Education. We have 18 districts, 220,000 students. I would like to remind us to stay true to the intent of LCFF, that is flexibility, maximal flexibility, that we need to be careful when crafting these regulations, templates, rubrics, that is, they can translate into restrictions. Adding restrictions adds a review and approval process, potentially creating a cumbersome review and approval process. Maintaining flexibility maintains timeliness of delivery of much needed services. An example I'll give you, Oakland Unified School District, which at one point can have over 140 funding pots. With additional restrictions, you're talking about a review and approval process. This could result in delays, anything from 2 to 3 months. And what you're talking about here is then students in the classrooms whom we're trying to serve have delays in services. So I'd like to remind us to really stay true to the spirit of LCFF and flexibility.
Good morning. This talk is entitled An Alligator That Bites. My name is Ted Hare. I'm a retired teacher and English learner coordinator. Economic impact aid funds are used for English learners and other struggling students. The 85% rule says a minimum of 85% of EIA funding must be allocated to the school sites. I love the 85% rule. It wasn't happening in my school district, and when I asked them to change their ways, they didn't. I even asked nicely. So a year later, I blew the whistle using uniform complaint procedures. My boss, the capital programs director, was allocating only 38% of the EIA funds to the school sites. The rest was either being stashed or diverted to GATE and AP students. At the time, English learners had 59% graduation rate. The school board has acknowledged my boss was illegally withholding funding and falsifying the financial data reported to the state. This is called fraud. They promised to clean up their act, but in reality, they just kept right on doing it. You might think the Office of Equal Opportunity would be all over this. That's the Civil Rights Office and the CDE. Think about it. Denying kids their legally entitled support is a little bit like George Wallace blocking the schoolhouse doors to keep African American students from registering back in the 60s. The CDE has 60 days to respond under the uniform complaint procedures. They're now at 741 days. I'll check my mailbox when I get home. When you folks draw up regulations, I'd like to see 3 things. First one is rules. Clear and consistent rules. Using the 85% rule for EIA, I was able to force the district to increase the funding that was allocated to the sites to 70%. Yes, I know 70% does not meet the legal minimum of 85%, but it sure beats the 38% they were doing before. 2, I'd like to see a uniform complaint procedure that works. 3, The CDE has been aware of the fraud with documentation for over 2 years and hasn't done squat. So the third thing I want is an enforcement alligator that bites when people violate students' rights. Thank you.
Good morning, Terry Burns on behalf of the California School Boards Association. And we want you to know that school boards are very much in understanding of the urgency of this situation and moving forward already to educate themselves and their communities about what LCF means, about what it can do, and where we go from here. We need to balance the urgency with the ability to get it right, to take that time, to have those conversations, to spend that money over time, not just throw money at a problem right now. We believe the best approach with the most powerful impact can only be had when subsidiarity is honored, when decisions are data and research based, and when boards think strategically about what is needed and what is likely to be successful in their communities. And you heard earlier, rural communities have very different needs than urban communities. Language in the statute on the ability to use supplemental and concentration funds in a way no more restrictive than Title I needs clarification for districts, the ability to use them district-wide, not just school-wide programs. And so the funds may be used to develop and implement a coherent and consistent program across the district from a systems perspective. The language on proportional expenditures needs to be clarified and needs to be reasonable and flexible. We need to understand early what our limitations are. We would encourage you to utilize existing data elements, not create new data elements for us to track, and to make the funding expenditures as flexible as possible. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Jennifer Labar, Executive Director for Oakland Unified School District Nutrition Services and the Public Policy and Legislative Co-Chair for the California School Nutrition Association. And I'm here today to talk about the impact that LCFF is having on schools and school districts that have Provision 2 and Provision 3 programs. Through these programs, 1,400 schools throughout the district are able to provide children in high-need schools with meals at no charge, and without the mandatory collection of free and reduced applications on a yearly basis. So with the introduction of LCSF's requirement to have free and reduced data per child, it's really making it difficult for districts to continue with this really critical program for our students. And so districts are now faced with either eliminating Provision 2 or 3 completely because of the undue paperwork that's being caused, creating a need to do a new base year for this school year, which is causing us to really worry about our state funding through LCFF, Title I funding, and also the state and federal meal program revenue that we're generating. And then also using this other form that was just released through FICMAT, which is only available in English, not the multiple languages that are needed throughout the districts, and which school districts themselves are not ready or have the ability to process, because we in the nutrition program cannot process those forms using our federal funding. So we're really asking that the state board work closely with California School Nutrition Association and other districts to ensure that this well-intended program for needy students doesn't wind up having a negative impact when it comes to the meal program, which is the basis of learning, needing to have healthy food available to these students on a daily basis. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Knox. I'm a 29-year staff member with California School Employees Association. We represent 206,000 of the 280,000 classified staff. This funding, thank goodness we have this new funding, but we are concerned. Classified staff are the first one on the site, they're the last one to leave. We're the food service employees that are going to be doing all this paperwork along with our clerical staff for the new funding mechanism. So it's extremely important that classified staff are not ignored in this process. Sadly and regrettably, when the the squeeze came to the budgets, the classified staff were the first ones to be laid off. And so we need to make sure that this funding process is fair and equitable with hiring the classified staff that will be a main part of the trigger mechanisms that we're talking about with the LCFF funding. Because it will be the clerical staff that does most of the reports that eventually will be seen by the Department of Education in the funding structure. We're also the paraprofessionals that sit in on and work directly with the ESL students. So most of the triggers here involve classified staff at some point. We're also the maintenance crews that go out and do projects that are going to be dealing with the Williams Act as part of law there. And we just want to ask that the classified staff be an integral part of this new structure and process, since we're such a large part of this funding mechanism. Thank you.
The last speaker on this topic is Tracy Whitten. Tracy?
Oh, that's okay. He covered it.
Okay. So now we'll move on to our final topic, and that is the local control accountability plans. We have a total of 20 speakers signed up for this particular topic. And so I'd like to invite Colette Marie McLaughlin, Deborah Kong, Ernie Silva, Robin Schmidt, Joshua Schultz. I should clarify, we didn't have any comments from Shasta on the last topic.
I'm Colette Marie McLaughlin. I'm an instructor at Gatlin College and a member of California Industrial and Technology Education Association. I'm speaking as an individual. I was a math teacher for 6 years, and I also have been taught industrial technology. And as someone that has seen the major needs that these major changes are hoped to address, one of the major needs I know as an instructor of both math and industrial arts is that if students aren't connected to careers, their academics often seem meaningless. And it is really thrilling to see that you're actually using career preparedness as a rubric and something you're going to measure. As an industrial arts teacher or industrial technology, it is critical that the flexibility that people are asking for does not exclude having students become accountable that they gain technology and career skills. They need to have certifications to prove that they know how to do careers. They need to show they're ready for careers. Without having good career training, many of the students that are graduating have no hope, and their futures are really leading right to McDonald's. I'm hoping that you will continue this so that our students will have an ability to access the jobs that we're needing to import from other countries by having a strong career technology and having rubrics that actually require that they're certified, that they have technical education, that there are shops and schools that will support the kind of education students need to get good manufacturing jobs and engineering careers. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Ernie Silva from Sciatech. We're a dropout recovery high school program that operates exclusively in partnership with Job Corps and WIA programs throughout the state. We really appreciate the work that the governor did on SB 91 and developing the local control funding formula, and the work that the department has done as well. SB 90, we are also a public high school that is operated as a charter school. SB 91 contains at least 5 provisions which specifically recognize that school priorities, due to the nature of the program operated, should include student outcomes consistent with those priorities. And what we're asking today is that, as the regulations are developed, that thread that runs through SB 91 and runs through the governor's work on the local control funding formula is front and center in in the regulations. The reason we need those things is that programs like ours that survey 100% very low-income population who are all dropouts. We use a competency-based instruction. We use open entry and open exit policies to serve these highly mobile students. So what we need to do is to make sure that the priorities, the kind of growth priorities, the other priorities that a school like ours has, are included specifically in the regulations as they are in statute. And then lastly, that the template that the state board puts together ought to also reflect those priorities for schools like ours that are operating with a very different model and with a very different population than a traditional high school. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joshua Schultz, the Napa County Office of Education. I really have 2 comments that I think I can fit both in 2 minutes. I wanted to pick up on the gentleman from Pittsburgh Unified who commented about the county office oversight role in the LCAPs. I agree that we need some clarity there. Terms like sufficient expenditures give me pause in trying to think about how we're going to implement those things. But I also think that we don't want to get so prescriptive that local communities, county offices working with district leadership and communities can work out what needs to happen in the local context, because as we've already heard, different districts are very different. Rural communities, urban communities have different populations and different needs. Then something that's probably not of interest to a lot of people in the room, because it's really about county offices and their LCAPs, but I don't want it to get missed in this process, is that the language for county offices talks about schools and programs, and the term program gives me some concern because only about 20-25% of our budget will be funded by the local control funding formula, even with all the categoricals that are rolled in. So we have a lot of programs that already come with rules in terms of direct grants and contracts from state agencies and federal agencies, fee-for-service programs that are arranged by contract MOU with districts. And while I can certainly try to make a nexus between those and specific goals and subpopulations that are identified in the plans, I'm not sure that it's a useful exercise for county offices or for CDE to be reviewing that.
Good morning, Robin Schmidt. I'm the Executive Director of Programs and Intervention at Antioch Unified. I know many of you, and I want to thank both the governor and the legislature for moving in the direction of something that could be profound. And I know I want to also acknowledge all of the groups in the room that support education as our partners in making sure that we focus on the achievement of students. And so in my comments today, which could go on and on because of the amount of time we think about this, I'm limited to 2 minutes or less now. I want to share some paradigms with you that really focus my thought and how I work forward on focusing for achievement of students. The first one is the plane's already in the air. Kids and students and staff, they're already here. And so therefore, we're already doing the work, and it's really hard as we walk down the rules. Oh wait, there's another rule. Well, we didn't plan for that. Now we have to stop. So, the more we tweak, the harder, the longer it is to get to a safe landing. Second one is subsidiarity. How many of you heard that term for the first time this year? The governor used it in January, and all of us quickly ran to our thesaurus and dictionaries to figure out what he was saying. And I'm going to read you a quote here. We're investing in our schools, but we're doing so in the context of encouraging local flexibility, local control. We want to put the decisions closer to the classroom. And I use the term subsidiarity, and that means let problems be solved closest to where they exist. Those institutions that have the most direct contact with the situation are students. The problem, student achievement, should have the greatest authority, said Governor Brown. That really means a lot to me in the context of what I have to do, and I have to think that we have to be very carefully in what we do in our planning. The third one was shared with me recently, and I've heard it many times, is show me your expenditures and I'll show you your priorities. And from the standpoint of an accountant, that's really true, and we can look at that. But I argue with my categorical directors and my fiscal people, or my planners, is that we really focus on student outcomes first and determine the strategies needed to that, and we'll really get where we need to go. Thank you.
So after our next speaker, we'll have Wanda Simpson-Brown, Mary Ann Burke, Randall Segucci Jr., and William Hewitt.
Hi, Deborah Kong, Early Edge, California.
We're really excited to see the promise of the local control funding formula and the opportunities for serving our youngest learners. We also believe that when we talk about the promise of greater efficiency and equity, we have to start by addressing the fact that not all of our children are starting school prepared to learn. The achievement gap really starts early. Research shows that the same groups of students behind in third grade started out behind when they entered kindergarten. And we know the districts are going to be required to improve outcomes for low-income English learner and foster youth students. And research shows that investing in the early years, including preschool and transitional kindergarten, is a proven way to do that, particularly on a number of priorities as outlined in the law. When it comes to student achievement, studies show that high-quality early childhood education results in improved reading and math achievement, and it can close the gap for English learners' school readiness skills. On pupil engagement, as measured by high school dropouts, those who attended early learning programs were significantly less likely to drop out. And early childhood education develops important social skills, like managing emotions and resolving conflicts that can result in fewer suspensions and expulsions down the road. When it comes to measuring the performance of students, we hope that you will also consider achievement in the early elementary years, particularly that critical developmental phase leading up to third grade. Research shows that students who don't read proficiently by third grade are 4 times more likely to leave school without a diploma. Thank you. We hope the state board and districts will consider what the research shows about the proven results that early childhood education has delivered and improved outcomes for the students who need it most.
Good morning. My name is Rhonda Simpson-Brown. I'm representing the California School-Age Families Education Program Advisory Work Group. In 1965, Governor Pat Brown realized that pregnant parenting students needed support services to graduate and become contributing members of society. Now we have closed that chapter and we've moved into the local control funding formula and no longer have specific funding requirements or funding itself. So our concern on this group is that even though we have a number of administrators and decision makers at the local level who support this population, there are a number that say we don't have pregnant and parenting students. And the reason we don't have them, as they will later admit, is they dropped out of school because they don't have some of the supports they need. There are provisions in the federal government called Title IX, which is not just for athletics, but also for pregnant and parenting students that have specific requirements to serve this population. They cannot be discriminated against. But it's surprising the number of administrators that have never heard of that. There's also gender equity in our education code that says they cannot be discriminated against. In the mid-1990s, the State Board of Education adopted a policy supporting pregnant and parenting students. So we are requesting that in the accountability measures that there is some element in there that will at least tweak the minds of the decision makers that this is a population we don't want to forget. So that we're requesting that, and it would also be wonderful if the state board could advocate with the governor to add pregnant or expectant and parenting teens as one of the neediest students. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Mary Ann Burke, and I'm the Director of Categorical and Special Projects for the Santa Clara County Office of Ed. Today I'm representing 32 school districts, not only the districts themselves, but primarily the parents, and focusing on educational equity for all of our students. I have questions and concerns about the new accountability instrument that will be designed when we consider all of the accountability instruments that parents and the community must deal with today for federal program monitoring and all types of audits. So what happens to the LEA plan? How do we tie the LEA plan to the SIPSA plan, to the English Learner Master Plan, and to the SARCs and all the other documents that parents must really understand? And how do we tie it to any type of equitable measurement when we come to accountability? So, when we consider the individualized needs of our English learners and the low-income, underperforming students and our foster youth, How do we maximize the existing instruments? We spent millions of dollars on designing the CARS system, the CASE system, and all of those instruments that funnel through that. And then how does that tie to federal program monitoring and this whole thing called No Child Left Behind that still needs to be reissued or updated or whatever we will see out of the feds? And then our second question, how do we ensure that No Child Left Behind compliance and non-duplication of reporting efforts, that's the federal jargon, are really targeting our underperforming students that we're trying to serve with this new formula? We are here in Santa Clara County to support this other in further dialogue and in piloting these measures. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Hi, good morning. My name is Randall Saragucci. I'm a legislative analyst with Students First here in California. We're a education policy nonprofit based here in Sacramento. First thing I want to say is the student-centered spending depends on student-centered measures. And so the local accountability, local control accountability plans will encourage districts to think about the student achievement goals when allocating their resources. But there must be appropriate state monitoring of each plan's adherence to the spirit of LCFF, and that is for those supplemental and concentration dollars, for those to be spent on low-income and English language learning students as of right now. As is currently written in statute and in the law, the local controlling funding formula doesn't require school site-specific expenditure reporting. And while any heavy state requirement to spend dollars one way or the other might limit flexibility, the state does have an interest and should have an interest in seeing that those funds are spent effectively at their ultimate destination, and that is at the individual schools, of course with the assistance of the districts. County superintendents will use the evaluation rubric to be created by the state board to identify school districts and charter schools in need of assistance. And the state superintendent will also use that rubric to help identify those schools and districts that need help with interventions. So it's very important and vital that the accountability monitoring be accurate on their side and on the local side to ensure that that identification and intervention works well. The development of the template and evaluation rubric must also incorporate proper consideration of the school-by-school data so that you can get that accurate help there. We have to be able to shine a light on success and replicate it thereafter. And the only way to really know how to do that is to make sure that the monitoring is good. Lastly, the plan should allow the districts the flexibility to increase successful practices and decrease unsuccessful practices in real time. I know that the plans are there and they're static, but schools should and districts should be flexible. That's what this plan is all about. Thank you.
So after our next speaker, we will have Debbie Betancourt, Steve Ward, Sergio Cuellar, and Martha Diaz.
Good morning. My name is William Hewitt, and I'm here representing David Brown, Executive Director of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, the Accreditation Committee for Schools, otherwise known as WASC. WASC has a history of combining school improvement planning as a partner with the California Department of Education into a single plan for student achievement. The accreditation process for secondary schools is well established, has a comprehensive professional development component, and has thousands of committed professionals in the field who practice the improvement protocols, apply the standards of quality based on well-researched and field-tested criteria and rubrics. WASC has developed a comprehensive set of rubrics for improving teaching and learning and has been applying them, polishing them, and continually improve them with thousands of secondary schools for over 20 years, both here in California and throughout the Pacific. This process is called Focus on Learning. We at WASC would ask that you include WASC in the accountability process for LCFF. The benefits would be continuing a meaningful improvement experience for secondary schools that is inclusive, eliminating a duplication of effort for sites, and using a process, a set of rubrics, criteria that are familiar and accepted by those that have experience with the WASC improvement and accreditation process. Finally, thank you very much for this opportunity. We hope to continue to work with the State Department as a partner in the future.
Good morning.
Debbie Betancourt, Superintendent, Folsom Cordova Schools. Today is the first day of school for our 19,000 students representing 32 schools. The LCFF establishes class size reduction starting point based on 12-13 class size average. Using this starting point, a school must reduce their class size by almost 12% of the gap between the starting point and 24-1. For most districts, each of their schools will have its own unique reduction goal to attain, and districts will be challenged to manage multiple unique class sizes. And a minor mistake at one site will jeopardize the district's entire LCFF class size reduction allocation. For example, we've calculated ours to need $1.4 million of funding, but only receiving $500,000 this year. Rather than establishing a unique starting point, we recommend the policy be amended to use 12-13 district class size average for this year, also for the first year of implementation, to use as that target. We also would like to ask that we be able to use the EL and LI funding formula for class size reduction on a school-wide basis. There was a comment about supplemental and concentration grants should be no more restrictive than Title I regulations. We request that they be less restrictive than Title I regulations, and that it be used on a district-wide basis so that everyone can benefit, not only low-income and EL students, but those students who are non-minority white students who are struggling. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Steve Ward. I am the Associate Superintendent for the Clovis Unified School District. Today I am representing the California School Finance Reform Coalition. Our 39 members and growing represent over 450,000 students. Our coalition is committed to ensuring the successful implementation of the LCFF and strongly supports the broad principles of local control and accountability intended to ensure that English learners, low income, and foster youth students are provided the services they need to be successful in school. At the same time, we request that the regulations maintain flexibility to allow school agencies to exercise local control so they can focus effectively on the individual needs of every student without excessive and unnecessary bureaucracy and oversight. Our coalition has developed several questions, and I will present two of those. Districts must maintain or submit their LCAP by July 2014, but the rubrics identifying a high-quality education program and performance expectations will not be adopted until the third year of the LCFF, October 2015. Districts need to identify their strengths and weaknesses in order to develop an effective plan. Question: as districts develop their LCAPs, they will need to know and understand the criteria that will be used to evaluate their success before developing a plan of action. What criteria should districts use prior to a rubric being adopted? Second question, the allocation of Common Core implementation funds will not be sufficient to ensure ongoing professional development around the changes needed for student mastery or the procurement of technology. If funding under LCFF is not sufficient to address all 8 priorities, will districts have the flexibility to choose its area of focus? Will districts have the flexibility under the principle of local control to utilize dollars for targeted students to support implementation of the 8 state priorities which will benefit all students as well as best first instruction? Thank you for your consideration and the critical work that you are doing to implement the policies which will impact the lives of millions of children for many, many years to come.
Good morning. My name is Hector Cuellar. I'm the statewide campaign director with Californians for Justice and also the statewide coordinator for the Campaign for Quality Education, representing parents and students across the state. Thank you again for having these sessions. It's important to have student and parent feedback in these. Unfortunately, because of the timing, we don't see parents or students here to give feedback. So something to maybe think about for the next upcoming sessions. This year will be the first test for local control decision-making through LCFF. It is imperative to have districts model true local control by engaging parents, students, and communities, especially those who represent these students who LCFF will be benefiting under LCFF, low-income students, EL learners, and foster care young people, to be truly integrated in the development of the LCAPs for each district. The LCAP should also monitor and clearly lay out how new funding under the LCFF formula given to districts this year is being used to benefit these students who have generated the funding for the districts. The state should also require districts to make sure local control accounting plans detail how expenditures in each fiscal year implement specific actions, strategies they identify as meeting their annual goals for students with the greatest needs. It makes no sense not to have school level transparency of funding when the law requires the plans to address annual goals and specific actions to meet those goals for both district and schools within that school district. So, thank you.
And following our next speaker, we will have Cynthia Rice, Mitch Inouye, Ian Padilla, Rebecca Shirley, and Eric Premack.
Good morning. My name is Martha Zaragoza Diaz, and I'm here representing the California Association for Bilingual Education and Californians Together Coalition. And these organizations have educators, parents, and civil rights organizations as members throughout the state. We view the LCFF as an opportunity for districts and parents to work together to design an effective educational plan to provide, commit resources to and address educational needs of English learners, low-income youth, and foster youth. With regards to the accountability plan, we have the following recommendations. These are some of the recommendations. The first one is to establish a process that allows for accountability and evaluation, specifically regarding programs for English learners, low-income students, and foster youth. Provide minimum standards for programs for English learners to ensure that supplemental and concentration grant funds are used to address educational deficits that result from the inability to speak English, and ensures that students have the opportunity to learn English and have full access to the core curriculum, and that these funds not be supplanted by base funding. The last one is to provide guidelines for addressing the federally required services for English learners so that they can develop English proficiency, that they have access to a comprehensive curriculum, and that programs are based upon sound educational theory and research. We have recommendations under the other two topical areas, and we will leave a copy of our comments with you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Rice. I'm from California Rural Legal Assistance, and these comments I submitted both on behalf of CRLA and the CRLA Foundation. CRLA represents low-income families throughout rural California, and the education advocacy that we do is particularly focused on the rights of English learners and farm worker families, and of course in rural areas. One of the important and actually disturbing things about LCFF is that it really undoes a state monitoring system that has existed in a very flawed manner over the course of the last 20 years. So it is incumbent upon the state board to address oversight and monitoring of the districts and county offices of education's implementation, as well as development of the local control accountability plans. I was actually going to spend most of my time talking this morning about the uniform complaint process and its gross inadequacy, and it's the fact that it's just not up to the task of being a fundamental aspect of the monitoring and oversight of local control funding formula implementation. But Mr. Hurd did a much better job than I ever could do by explaining in real time, in real personal experience, what happens. I can tell you that a year and a half ago, California Rural Legal Assistance, in connection with some litigation, did a Public Record Act request about the uniform complaint process, and the dozens and dozens of parents and school site staff who had submitted similar complaints to the UCP had exactly the same experience. They received little, if no, feedback from CDE for years on end. There was inadequate remedies available to CDE even when they found, finally after a year and a half or 2.5, that there was a violation. So the UCP process has to be strengthened. Specific remedies have to be provided, and direct intervention and timelines have to be mandatory and enforced. enforced in order for it to be an effective way of monitoring what is obviously some very fundamental disagreements between parents and teachers and maybe school administrators about what the best way to both fund, implement, and oversee the specific requirements of LCFF. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mitzi Inoue, and I'm a member of the California School-Age Families Education CalSafe Program Advisory Work Group. I'm here to request that there needs to be an accountability measures developed and addressing the needs of expectant and parenting students and their children. If this population is not addressed and measures put in place, students will drop out of school and not graduate, and their children will not be school ready, as they have shown in the past 13 years. The CalSafe program evaluations over the past 12 years has shown that with appropriate support services, students succeed and graduate and go on to post-secondary education. Without these supports, students will not stay in school, especially with child care and development services for their children. This is often a forgotten population, which I hope will not be left out of the LCFF. Also, just as a note, OCR has increased their efforts to enforce Title IX, as Rhonda Simpson Brown had mentioned, in respect to pregnant parenting students. Thank you.
Hello, Eric Premack with the Charter Schools Development Center. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Wanted to reinforce our concerns about the differences between the charter world and the traditional school district world. And in specific, we have very different legal structures. We have fundamentally different governance arrangements. Even the bases of our accounting and the account code structures and the ways we develop our budgets are different. And as such, we hope that the State Board, as it goes forward and develops these regulations, ensures that the flexibility of charter schools is protected in this process. Fortunately, the law does call for allowing charter schools to align with the state priorities to the extent that they apply to the particular nature of a charter school's mission or instructional program. And given all of these differences and the fact that the law calls for respecting these differences, we would suggest that the process for developing the templates and the rubrics for charter schools, while it proceed on a temporally similar path, that it be done separately from the ones that govern school districts and county offices to ensure that this level of flexibility is protected. Thank you.
Rebecca Curley on behalf of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. CASH advocates for school districts and their industry partners on issues related to school facilities. LCFF and the LCAP create significant new facilities obligations, which should be appropriately reflected in the regulations. One of the state priorities that must be addressed in the LCAP is that school facilities must be maintained in good repair as specified in Education Code Section 17002. Because the LCAP establishes a school accountability model that is based on outcomes, it is not sufficient to equate good repair with minimum contributions to a routine restricted maintenance account. Instead, districts must ensure that all of their schools are actually maintained in a manner that is clean, safe, and functional. We believe that districts may use supplemental and concentration grant funds for a variety of capital purposes, including achieving good repair. Because pupils who generate these grants are served by the full school facility, the funds could be used for school-wide capital improvements, such as roof repair or HVAC installation, as well as for more targeted purposes, like modernizing or constructing facilities to serve the unique needs of English learners or low-income pupils, such as reading resource rooms or rooms for other block programs. In cases where classrooms are added for these purposes outside of the school facility program, we believe that the new capacity should not be chargeable against the district's baseline new construction eligibility. Lastly, because the intent of LCFF is to achieve more equitable outcomes by targeting resources to the populations that are most in need, We believe the good repair must be equitable repair within each district. This means schools with concentrations of English learners and low-income pupils should be maintained in comparable condition to other schools in the same district. Thank you.
And our last speaker here, and then we'll turn it over to Shasta.
And I will be brief. My name is Ian Padilla. I am also from the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. We have two letters because we had a kind of a late idea. This one is more specific, more technical. With regard to the whether or not the board makes the decision to develop a more comprehensive or more specific template for good repair, CASH recommends that in the interim that the facilities inspection tool, the FIT, that is already in use, be used until there is more certainty. We deal with a lot of districts that are uncertain as to how to meet this, and we think in the interim that would be a reasonable approach. And just for brief history, in the Williams settlement, there was the interim evaluation instrument, and that was used until the full FIT was developed. So it would be within the same context and something that is known to districts. So we look forward to working with you because there has been so many changes to capital issues and particularly maintenance and operations. We look forward to working with you on these issues to make sure that schools are clean, safe, and functional. Thank you.
So with that, we'll turn it over to our comment from Shasta County Office of Education.
Thank you. We have one speaker on this topic, and it's Joan Navarez.
Hello, my name is Joan Navarez, and I'm with the California School Employees Association representing classified school workers. The design of local plans, budgets, and accountability measures should include the input and involvement of classified employees. School employees have the first-hand knowledge of what works and what doesn't. Classified employees provide clean, safe learning environments. In the past, school districts have had to cut food service and transportation programs. These are the very programs and personnel that serve the students targeted for additional services under the LCFF. Paraeducators work close with students needing the most assistance and reach out to their families and communities to assist these students with ongoing needs. Food service personnel provide many students with the only meal they'll receive for the day. Allowing the students to focus on their studies. Students often communicate their needs to their bus drivers, their paras, and their custodial personnel, knowing that these workers will help them get the services they need. The support services provided by Classified are necessary to make sure students show up and get the help they need to be successful in life. It's these services, not just instruction, that help the underserved student population. Adequate funding must be budgeted to restore and improve these essential programs and positions. Classified employees are a vital link between the schools and the parents. We are the first they see in the morning and the last connection of the school day. The new formula is an opportunity to improve programs and services for students. Classified employees will play a fundamental role in the success or failure of this transition. Classified provide translation services, arrange social services, coordinate with law enforcement and other local agencies. As parents and neighbors in the community, classified employees have insight in important family and cultural factors that impact student success. Classified employees as school workers, parents, and community members can open communication with the districts to make sure students and community needs are being met. Classified employees should be involved in the plans, budgets, and accountability measures for LCFF. Only by working together can we provide education for all. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speaker list on this topic.
Thank you very much. So that actually is the last speaker that we have from our public comment. And what I would like to close with is first thanking you for all being here. You have a question?
Yes. Given that this was scheduled until 12:30, is there an opportunity for people who didn't sign in to comment?
So we have opportunities, and let me explain what those are. So first, let me thank you for being here. And our opportunities for continued comment include the comment cards that are available. Some of you pick them up. We have some more at the desk at the back side of the room here, additional comment cards. We very much encourage you to feel free to sign in through the comment cards. We also, as you can see on this slide, it is in the handout that you received today, welcome your comments via email. And just to keep this open and fair between all our sessions, we're unfortunately limited to who signed in this morning in terms of accepting comments. So we are working hard to keep consistency between the 3 locations so everyone has a comparable experience, knowing that there are certainly more ideas left to be shared, and we definitely want to hear them. So invite you to take a comment card, fill that out here today. If you'd like to leave written comments, please also feel free. We'll take those into the record. And then if you would like to send things by email, I encourage you to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we will be posting a summary of all 3 sessions. This is really the beginning of the conversation, not the end. The intention of posting the summary is that it allows for all of you to digest what may have been shared in other locations, certainly digest what's occurred today, and comment further. And we realize that while the time is short to develop templates and regulations, there is time. And we want to take advantage of every minute that we have to do this with the public insight in mind. We also will have today's session archived. So some people have joined us online to view today's session. The archive will be available in the next few days. If you go to the Department of Education's website, you'll see the notice that had information about today's meeting. It also gave information about how to log in to the high-speed network and access today's session online. That will, when you go to that, it'll indicate where to get the archive. It'll be posted, I believe, through that website, and we'll make sure that there are updates and links through the department's website as soon as possible. So within the next few days, we should have that up and available. Just want to, again, reiterate the thanks and appreciation we have for you taking time out of your schedule. We realize, we can't meet everyone's needs in terms of schedule and time, and that's why we've created multiple opportunities and avenues to accept comments. And do encourage you to work with your stakeholder groups to share their comments through one of the methods that have been created. So thank you very much for your time today.